let's bring up an idea that if you mentioned 2 years ago, you'd probably get ridiculed to some extent. But if you mentioned it today, then, oh boy, this is just fodder for a Lego Rocks 99 YouTube video to be made about your idea. Let's talk about it right here. Okay, let's go to thehockeynews.com. You know the Hockey News, they got a magazine every month. You read it, it's great. They have prospect rankings, they have news, they have everything about hockey, or at least most things about hockey. But what they also do have are redrafts, where they take a look at past NHL draft classes and say, okay, if we were to redo the draft, let's do it in this order. Because this is the order that, corresponding to today's NHL, the players are actually ranked based off of hype, based off of talent, based off of value, etc. So, earlier this year, they published their 2018 redraft, and if you do know who we're talking about in this video here, we're talking about Alexander Romanov and Evan Bouchard, because these two guys are both NHL prospects taken from the 2018 draft. Edmonton took Bouchard 10th overall. Alexander Romanov was taken much later by the Montreal Canadiens at 38th overall. It's kind of funny because Bouchard was a guy who at the time, a lot of people thought could have been a top 10 pick. And because of his crazy good offensive numbers as a right-handed D-man in the OHL, people thought, okay, this guy could legitimately go top 5. Like, what the heck? Why is he available at 10? Romanov, on the other hand, is kind of the opposite story. When he was taken at 38, people were like, what the heck? Why is this guy going 38? Romanov's rankings for future considerations was 179th, HockeyProspect.com 156, TSN and Bob McKenzie at 83rd, and NHL Central Scouting as the 115th highest European skater. So this guy was a huge reach at 38th overall. But the Hockey News redraft of the 2018 draft goes as follows. You got Dahlin, Svechnikov, Hughes, Tkachuk, Kotkaniemi is over there too, so if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan, hey, Kotkaniemi got taken a little bit later. Hayton, Zadina, Boqvist, Dobson, Farabee, who is really good, Rasmus Sandin, Grigory Denisenko, and then at 13th overall, you have Alexander Romanov. And at 14th overall, you have Evan Bouchard. So the topic of this video here today is whether or not Alexander Romanov is indeed a more valuable prospect than Evan Bouchard is. Now, how exactly does this redraft work? Well, just based off of the rankings that they already put out, as we noted, Dahlin, Svechnikov, Hughes, Tkachuk, to me, it looks like what this ranking is going off of can mostly be divided into two parts. First off, you have what the player is today, and second off, you have what the player can be. Because when it comes to what the player can do today, all the guys who are in the NHL are at the top, which makes sense because, hey, if you're in the NHL, it technically means you're better than all the other players who aren't in the NHL. That's just kind of how hierarchies work. And as for who's in the NHL, the recommendations as to who is more valuable in the NHL plays into how the rankings go among NHL players. Dahlin is really good, so he's number 1. Svechnikov is really good too, he's number 2. Quinn Hughes is good, he is number 3. You could argue that Quinn Hughes could probably be a little bit higher, but regardless, when you go past number 11, which is Rasmus Sandin, you step into the realm of players who aren't NHL players. Sandin, Farabee, Dobson, all the players on top, they're all NHL caliber talents. At least you could say that about Kotkaniemi, I guess. Not too sure about that over there. But next up, it's the tier of non-NHL players. Denisenko, Romanov, Bouchard. Denisenko, one of the top players in terms of offensive potential in the NHL's affiliated prospect system today, so I can understand why he is number 12. But Romanov and Bouchard are in a different kind of tier, because Bouchard was supposed to be a crazy good top 2 potential D-man with amazing offensive talent. Alexander Romanov was just supposed to be a normal, shutdown kind of guy from Russia. So, when it comes to this ranking over here, what you're really doing is you're putting Romanov and the talent and the projection that he does have over whatever it is that Evan Bouchard projects, in your opinion. And that's ultimately what most of these lists should be. At least that's what I think. If you're ranking a guy who isn't in the NHL against another guy who also isn't in the NHL, you rank them based off of who you think is going to be the best in the NHL when they're both in the NHL. Which is why you could definitely see an argument for Alexander Romanov being over here, because the style of game that he plays in the KHL, where he's just so gifted in shutting the play down, being aggressive, and just overall being a good defenseman, is so translatable to the NHL, and we also have had that added benefit of seeing Romanov dominate international tournaments against guys in his own age group. Playing against other U20-year-olds, Romanov legitimately explodes offensively, and he reaches a gear that we haven't seen in the KHL yet, mostly due to the fact that the KHL and the way they play their games is a little bit different than how the IIHF plays their games in the international tournaments. But Romanov shows such versatility that it's easier to me to understand why somebody would say, I prefer this long-term value of a Romanov over the boom or maybe even bust potential of an Evan Bouchard. Because Bouchard is in a really interesting kind of spot too. And I've made my fair share of Evan Bouchard videos in the past, don't get me wrong. I've been talking about this guy for the past like two and a half years pretty much. But Bouchard to me has always had that weird quality of quote-unquote slowing down the game, but not in the way that I thought was valuable. Sure, it worked against other OHL guys who were teenagers, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, but in my opinion, the way that Evan Bouchard slowed down the game, where he would just stop skating and let everything go by him, wasn't really going to fly when he got to higher levels of hockey, especially with the fact that his foot speed and mobility wasn't all that great in his draft year. He was getting outworked and outskated by 17-year-olds. What more when this guy was playing in the NHL at 20 years of age, playing against fast guys who were already in their mid-20s. That was the problem that I personally had with Evan Bouchard, but going into the AHL, he legitimately has been pretty good, producing at an offensive rate of 36 points in 54 games, especially as a rookie. That's not bad. There certainly does exist a boatload of potential for Evan Bouchard still, it's just that I was always one of the people who didn't really believe in it as much as others did. Also, taking into consideration the fact that these two players were so far apart in the draft that you have to talk highly about Romanov to talk about him in this conversation, because he was drafted like 20 picks after in the second round. Bouchard is supposed to be up here because he was drafted 10th, but he's already back here behind all the other guys who have overtaken him in these draft rankings. Guys taken after Bouchard but are ahead of him in this ranking over here. You have Rasmus Sandin taken 29th, Grigory Denisenko taken 15th, Joel Farabee, who is in the NHL, at 14th, Noah Dobson at 12th. All these guys were all supposed to be not at the same level as an Evan Bouchard. Everybody's consolidated rankings said that Bouchard was better than Farabee. People said that Bouchard was better than Denisenko and Sandin by a long shot. So the simple fact that he did indeed get overtaken by some of these other prospects puts him in a position where we have to talk about the negatives and why he fell down. Because a lot of these other guys just kind of exploded. Some of these guys are looking to be late round steals. Sandin's a really good player, and he was taken 29th. But getting back to the main argument, when it comes back to Evan Bouchard and Alexander Romanov, do I believe both of these players have sky-high potential? Yes, absolutely yes. Alexander Romanov in his prime, if he combines the shutdown, aggressive game that he played in the KHL with the offensive flair that he was able to distribute in the World Juniors and other tournaments like that, then we could legitimately see a 30, 40-point defenseman who can play some really good shutdown minutes in the top 2, maybe the top 4 of the Montreal Canadiens system long-term. And if everything goes right for Evan Bouchard, the concerns that I had with his mobility go away and he learns how to use that big frame of his effectively, then we could legitimately see a very, very good offensive defenseman getting upwards of 60 points in a year. That's the prime that I see with Evan Bouchard, but the likelihood of him reaching that prime, in my opinion, is lower than the likelihood of Romanov reaching his prime. So, to that point, I can understand why the Hockey News guys would put Romanov above Bouchard, but at the same time, in terms of raw ceiling, I would not be surprised if those out there said, okay, but Bouchard's got a really good offensive ceiling too. So, comment down below what you think about this weird topic. I know it's a very nitpicky kind of thing, taking a look at one redraft and taking a look at one guy placed upon another guy and saying, okay, let's talk about that one little pairing right there. But as a fan of NHL prospects, as a fan of the Montreal Canadiens, and as a guy who has done his fair share of talking about Evan Bouchard in the past, I felt like this was definitely a topic that I wanted to explore. So comment down below what you think about these two prospects. I hope you enjoyed this video. So that's Ross 99, and bye.